it takes a lifetime to learn your craft, but life is actually short. That was my inspiration at a certain point in my life, and it was about 12 years ago that I started this company to get the projects going that really meant something in my life. Hi, Ravi.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
I actually haven't seen you in a while, so it's nice to see your face.
Exactly, likewise. But we have known each other for a long time. I remember going to Brimful of Asha, and I hadn't met you, but I felt like I knew you from the kind of soul of that piece. And I introduced myself, and then when I went to NTS in 2012, 2013,
You gave me my first non, you my first directing outside directing gig was you.
Line in the Streets. You were the first director that I brought into to my tenure at the school.
One of the best things about that, I think, was that I mean, beyond the experience and working with students and blah 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 blah, was as a director, I had the time to work on the technical aspects of the craft. Like you don't get time in a theater. And so, Kim Pertel was the lighting mentor. So I get time with Kim to learn about lighting and, the time of the process and all of that, because prior to that was very small shows and not a ton of time. So it was really a really important time.
That's fantastic. Everybody learns. Like if a school is doing its thing, everybody who's there is learning. I learned a lot as well.
Yes, and now you have this new identity. You've left. You're freelancing. You're out there in the bad world.
Yeah, and time. It's interesting you mentioned time because the company that I have, Vita Brevis Arts, that name, it's like an umbrella company, and it's through that that I produced Fall on Your Knees in partnership with fantastic theaters across the country. But that name of that company is from the Hippocratic Oath of Vita Brevis Ars Longa, like it it takes a lifetime to learn your craft, but life is actually short. That was my inspiration at a certain point in my life, and it was about 12 years ago that I started this company to get the projects going that really meant something in my life and that demanded a lot of craft and that might take a long time. And it turned out with Fall on Your Knees, that did took about a decade. And the show itself was two parts. And so it's a great thematic connection with you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Mahabharata, we actually just closed in Toronto yesterday, and it's a major epic, like you said. It's been an amazing journey to sit with a story for you know 8 to 10 years, and then to see it realized, and then to have it continue on. So we're in the middle of an international tour. We're currently we were at Banff Center in Perth, Australia, at the Perth Festival, and then we just closed in Toronto, and then in about a week we're at the National Arts Center, and then in 3 weeks we'll be at the Lincoln Center in New York. So it's like really awesome to have this much time with the piece, and for it to go to so many different places is really really exciting.
We've chatted a little bit in during the process of making it, but not really. We really haven't talked, and we've had some fantastic conversations over the years where I've been so impressed with your energy of reaching out to other participants outside of Canada and really bringing them into a vision you have for making theater that is rooted in Canada, that's about your experience in Canada and Canadian culture. I've always admired that. I've always been really motivated by whenever we exchange thoughts. And so with this one, I thought I really want to dig into um, some questions that maybe other people share. Certainly, people ask me about Fall on Your Knees, like why take on such a challenging project? Because all the rules in Canada are don't make it too big, don't make it too long. Like we're working often with scarcity, with few resources. So, what compels you to do that? And also, just chatting about how, because the other similarity we have are the two people who are kind of initiating the production of these projects, co-adapters involved in the execution of them. And they are also, pan-Canadian. In your case, they're international partners. In my case, it's all Canadian touring. You've been to all these different places inside Canada and outside Canada, and, Follow toured to 4 different cities in a series. So there's those similarities, and also what are the differences? Like, what were the journeys that made it possible, um, with that? So, my first question, are you game to talk about this? This is like these are my burning questions, right?
I'm in, and I hope you answer some too. It's yeah, yeah, great.
The why and the how. So, like, the why, 'cause I get the why sometimes. Sometimes it's self-evident because Falling on Your Knees is a book people love, and it means a lot to them. So the why is like, why would you take a risk and maybe wreck it? Or why does it need to be theater? But in your case, why this story?
So Mahabharata is, it's a story that's about 4,000 years old. It's one of the longest poems on record. It's this behemoth of let's say a story, but it contains all the wisdom and philosophies of the Hindu culture and so many foundational uh, ideas for like a billion people in India and then the diaspora. And many people will have encountered it through the Bhagavad Gita because they've trained in yoga, and it's this major work that what is it? The FBI, Cash, whatever Patel, I think he instead of the Bible, he was sworn in with the Bhagavad Gita. So there's this huge religious kind of following around it, and so um, as a work, it's core foundational for so many people. It means there's a lot of ownership over this story. So as a storyteller, that it's challenging because, as you said, you don't want to get it wrong. Um, so the first part was sort of finding myself within that. Why, I'm Indian, I'm Canadian, I'm neither. How do I find myself in this story? So I co-created it with Miriam Fernandez and the company of the actors and the musicians and everybody played a major run. The designers, like it was a really collaborative experience. But as writers, Miriam and I, we really landed on this ancient idea of dharma, which is a major Hindu idea. And dharma is a complicated word because it can be translated or interpreted in many different ways, depending on what religion you are, depending on how you interpret the Sanskrit, depending on. And what it comes down to for us was we basically were inspired by an Indian mythologist named Devdutt Patnaik, who wrote a book called Jaya, which is his version of the Mahabharata, and he interprets uh, dharma is the law that governs humans, and so which is in opposition to the law that governs animals. So in the animal kingdom, the big fish eats the small fish. That's fine. There's no judgment there. That's just how nature works. The lion hunts the lamb. There's no judgment. That's how the world works. But because humans have the ability to have empathy, and we live in a world where we're trying to build a civilization where not only the strong survive, that animals live that way, but humans, dharma is that the burden of civilization is for those with the most privilege to take care of those with with the least. And that's complicated because in every conversation you are in any moment you're in, that privilege and exchange is changing. And if we were all to embody this dharmic idea that those with the most privilege must take care of those with the least, we would actually be building what a healthy civilization. You can imagine a world where we are those who feed and those who are fed, and it's a much more healthy relationship where we're actually thinking about how we care for each other. And so what more a time to be thinking of a message like that, that's 4,000 years old, that continues to be the problem that we struggle with, and in a time of political turmoil and personal turmoil and divisions that we're in, um, I think that message um, it resonates now more so. And to be honest, to have shown that in 23, which we premiered at the Shaw Festival, and then we went to the Barbican Center in 2023, and when we closed at the Barbican, our closing show was October 7th. So the feeling in the audience was very different. There was a lot more emotion and tears when we're talking about breaking cycles of revenge, when we're talking about empathy and caring for others, and what is it to be part of a family that is divided. that these messages resonate that much more. And so now in Toronto in 2025, a lot of people have been saying the show's really grown. It's very different. And I say to a lot of people, well, the audience has grown and they are very different. And I think that our understanding of the world that we're in and the connection we have with these themes um, is just it's just more and more.
That idea of the material, the meaning of the material changing over time because of the context, and some things staying the same and intensifying, and the context around it making those ingredients that much more urgent. That I really identify with that.
Yeah, what's the why of Fall on Your Knees?
Yeah, I mean, that book was for so many people really life changing. And for a lot of people, when they read it, it changed their lives because I think Anne Marie captured um, lives that are like a view of a part of the world, like Cape Breton, for example, that is innately intercultural. And a lot of people wouldn't see themselves in those kind of other versions of what people believe Canada to be, which is more homogenous. And Canada has never really been fully homogenous, right? There's a bit of whitewashing that has happened with our own histories, I believe. So I think in that respect, people felt seen. And the lesbian love story, especially, for a lot of people, the way it was carried, and also the way that the toxicity inside family dysfunction, how that was revealed and the impact it has. So those ingredients, I think, were all contributing it to be really a life-changing book. And I was one of those people as well, where I really, coming from New Brunswick and being a lesbian and coming from a family where like family secrets that are eh, toxic and identities that are intercultural and like things that make up a lot of our families. Um, so I really felt brought to life by that book. And so it was kind of a dream to see if I felt that making a theatrical adaptation would bring it to more people. And as time passed, would bring it to different generations. And, but I wasn't sure because a book doesn't need to be a play. Like I know with your piece, it's famously been done by Peter Brooks. And,
And performed in temples constantly everywhere. Yeah.
when you talk about the audiences and the reaction, that experience of people sharing in a story that has redemption through telling the truth, there is a healing that happens in that journey, in that long experience. And so when people say, "Well, if you just did it for 3 hours, if you just shortened it, we could reproduce it or sell it more easily," but it would be a completely different story. It wouldn't be about generational trauma, generational redemption, and the audience wouldn't have the same experience.
I'm gathering that people have asked you to shorten it. How long is the runtime?
It's 2 pieces of, just under 3 hours each. So it's 5 hours plus.
Yeah, so we're similar, about 5 hours. Entire in its entirety, probably 6 hours with breaks, many breaks. What I say to people is that um, it's short-sighted to think that you're trying to squeeze story into time. Um, the time that story takes is the time it takes. In our case, thousands of years is takes they're big ideas that aren't processed necessarily in the time that we assume audiences can sit. And I think that assumption is a bad one to make, because what I say to people often when they're like, "Oh wow, it's long," I say, "Yeah, well, so is a trip to London. And if you're going to get on a plane, you know that it's going to be a 7 hour trip. And when you get there, you're going to have gone through something and you will be curious about the world you will step into. And you'll want to take the tube and go somewhere." And I think that approach is important to remind people of, that it's not foreign, and that it's worth it. It's worth sitting with ideas for a long time and going on a journey with someone for a long time. There's a feeling at the end of that you've gone through something together, and that, again, in a time where we don't have to tune in at the same time anymore. We don't all watch. We're not participating in the way that we once used to as a unit. Everything is very independent and individualized. And I feel that that's important. It's sort of a part of the message of the experience.
Yeah, and I think people like in our souls, people who love theater, who create it, and who attend it, all the audiences that support it. In our souls, we know this to be true because theater keeps dying and not dying for decades and decades and decades. And theater is the first storytelling, gathering storytelling. It's ancient. So I think we all know that. We just need to be reminded. We need to remind ourselves of what we already know, 'cause I did see that with the, audiences with Fall on Your Knees, people would jump to their feet, which is beautiful, and then they'd hug people and not like, not just their family, but, like, people who were distinctly not at the theater together would be hugging each other in rows in front, and it was a f it was, because the ending is something about overcoming coming through something together, and it was wild and not your regular standing ovations. It was a lot of hugging, but neither of us have venues, and that presents opportunities, but also challenges if you're trying to, bring something forward, right? And so I'm interested in how, like you were at the Shaw for a couple of weeks, you had a commission with a Barbican, so you had a buy-in, to be blunt about it, internationally. And I'm really curious about that. And like I went a whole different route, which was all like Jillian Kiley had this vision about having all the Canadian companies producing it together so that it wasn't a touring NAC show, sort of to decentralize this idea of what a national show could be. So they're kind of opposite models, which premiered at around the same time through support of the National Creation Fund. So how much of that process was a plan, or how much was it, somebody came to you, like, how did you figure out your path or your show's path?
Shaw was an amazing partner. They lasted with us throughout the pandemic. Um, Prior to that, actually, the show almost collapsed, and um, Tim, both Tims were amazing. They were like, "Yep, no problem. We'll push it to next season. We have enough time. Just take care of it and figure this out." And like, we just needed the time and space to be able to figure out this massive thing. And I think, I appreciate what you said about the company, but one of the things that's been integral about um, working on a show of this size and scale is that we had to grow the infrastructure of the company in order to sustain it. And so at the time in 2016, it was, these three kind of core collaborators who didn't know, who were building the planes as we were flying it. Um, we had the sense that if we were going to play with this kind of scale and money, we really need to build a massive team that could really take this on. And so the growth of the company in conjunction with the growth of with the show and its realization is what's the word? They coincide. So Shaw was an amazing partner. Shaw allowed us to accomplish. Uh, we had an international team, so we could house people there. They housed us. They gave us place to work, and the room is like this gorgeous studio with fucking windows. You want to be there. You feel special. You have prop people working on things. You have people access to resource that we would never have access to, and they were extremely generous with it. And really helped us figure out the crazy puzzle piece of what it would be to build this show. So them as an anchor, and then throughout the journey of it, they stayed, and that was tremendous. And Barbican 2 was amazing partners throughout the pandemic. They stayed with us. Again, you win, we won, we lost, we won, we lost. The roller coaster of that is a whole other story, I guess. But their partnership was a great anchor as well. And we had an amazing commercial producer, Kendra Bader, who's at Mervish, who was just a brilliant mind to go, look, here are the parameters. All right. Like the budget's not going to pass this. You got to figure this out in this, like here, like really firm, supportive hand that gave us the right constraints for us to artistically bump against. And you need that. When the world is anything, it's like how to decide anything. Um, So it feel it's really like Mahabharata. It feels like we met the right characters at the right time on the journey at every phase. And, the support that we got, really we're so grateful for, and it's a really kind of what we hope we're a good example of what happens when you really support something. And the National Art Center, the Creation Fund, has been a ridiculous partner, just at every turn supportive. Again, for me, it just links directly to Mahabharata. Like, if you stop believing, if you stop caring, um, it goes away. And if the volume of people diminishes, it goes away. And for us, that support really is pretty phenomenal. It is, in fact, it is phenomenal. It is a phenomenon that gave us a kind of support and energy, and I do believe it impacted the quality, not only the quality and the rigor of the work because we had time, but I feel like that's what you're receiving at the end. I feel you receive that somehow. It seeps through. You can't not have Jeff Cummings' energy because he was the roadmap maker come through that show, or anyone at the Shaw or anyone at the Barbican, anyone anywhere who touched us. I think their DNA is all over it.
It's interesting, the international aspect that you're bringing in, this like early days, the identity of it, and your identity as an artist, having trained in Europe, and the connections that you have there, that has been a big part of the fuel to make all this possible.
Well, and I think fundamentally because we were playing in so many different forms, I don't think it would have been possible for us to make what we made. I think that became clear to me in the workshopping. We auditioned across Canada, and I did little workshops, and I was like, no, like, we need someone who's a brilliant actor and a cut the collie dancer, and not that we knew that in advance. It because he was in the room that we were able to go, oh, we need this. It needs to be the way that the story is told. If we don't have these experiences and these perspectives and these talents, which isn't to say that Canadians aren't talented. I'm not saying that at all, but just difference. If we didn't have difference, and I think that that's something that's so vital. Is and you said this at some. Oh, you were talking about Canada's history, not homogeneity. I mean, I think that it is deceiving at times that we assume identity is a differentiator, and it absolutely is. But also, the culture of theater is also something that we forget can make us just the same. And understanding that the culture and the why of theater, of how we make it internationally in different areas of the world, is different, and that the alchemy of that difference is something that my whole life, I've been inspired by, and it's exciting to make work in that cauldron.
It's interesting because like I grew up in New Brunswick, which is a very small province, and the piece is set in Cape Breton, and sort of what people call have-nots, and I don't like to say that because it's a misrepresentation, but there's some truth to it in terms of access to resources and whatnot, and it's their identities, right? The very strong cultures, um, and it's interesting to me that the smallness of the roots of my background, and also the where the story comes from, actually also informed some of the choices. And along the way, I contacted Janine Tessori, who's a beautiful, incredible American composer, and I wanted input from her when we were working with Hannah about what the musical nature of it is. So she's from an American background. She's got the Tony Awards for musical theater and musicals in the States. And one of the things that was really important to her, that was really helpful for us, is that this is not a musical. This is not a genre. This is actually the music in the book. Everyone is a musician in the book and a performer, so it has a place in it. But she really encouraged us to go to the domestic, to go to the instruments that are around the house, the period that this piece came from, the place that the piece is rooted in, and its hands, like low tech. How do people make sound? What's the music that comes from the Gaelic community, from the Arabic community, from the Jewish community, from the people, from the earth, from this what looks like the small world. So a lot of our style is also like there's no projections. There's cultural musical forms that are rooted in these different cultures, very specific and really hands-on, the whole style of it. There's an arc of the show where the flies come in and it's very elaborate lighting and really sophisticated. To make it something seem simple, you have to have a lot of really talented creative artists to make it seem like it's really simple. Like those sets that have no sets, that takes a lot of artistry to make it seem like there's no set, right? Um, but that really, the localness of it and the Canadianness of it really informed, and the distinct people that are carrying the stories really informed what the style was. And we kinda dug into, uh, the more local and the more domestic, because that's where the heart of the issues are, so that when we do go to Harlem and the Club Mecca, it's, like, mind-blowing. It's very specific, it's in a period of time where it's very acoustic, but it's a whole other world that explodes the minds of the people. Um, and interesting when you're talking about casting, because we needed to find prodigies, like a blues prodigy, a opera prodigy, like it's about a musical prodigies, a whole family of them. And so finding all these players, and we were very fortunate that we actually had we found these miracle artists in Canada, which was great. So it was all Canadian all the time. Um, but what I was going to mention, I mean, in this case, your company grew to support the international and the infrastructure of the piece, and it's interesting because Vita Brevis is me, and then David Abel came on board, and then Paul Beauchamp, who is now the producing director with me, and the NAC was our they were our umbrella, they were our home base, and then all the partners with the Grand Theatre, Canadian Stage was incredibly brave, putting it forward, passionate belief, Neptune Theatre, and these donors who came on board. So all the people driving these theaters, they were, that passion you talk about, that big yes, that conviction about the story being so important to people, that was breathtaking for me, because that seemed to be, how like a magnet, you draw a magnet and all the metal comes to it? That was the story. It like I was the engine to get the story, and Hannah was the drive and Anne Marie, but the story itself, like the meaning of that story and what it had to say for us and with us and about us, was what drew everybody in its wake. And that to me was, I guess, the most inspiring thing, because it's a real reminder that, you can have charismatic leadership, but really it's the story that people are, like the importance of the story that you're telling. Thanks for chatting with me about this. I hope we get to have more conversations in the future. I've always enjoyed them.
Me too. This was great. I appreciate you making the time.